I'm Amanda, 63 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew my son Jeffrey better than anyone. After my husband died, I built a real estate business from scratch while raising Jeffrey alone. When he married Cynthia, I was overjoyed and helped them buy their dream home. I co-signed their mortgage, paid for renovations, and never questioned their growing financial needs. Then came that phone call, the one my son forgot to hang up, that shattered everything I believed about our relationship. Before I tell you how I discovered my son's true colors, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had someone underestimate you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My journey as a businesswoman began 15 years ago, when my husband Daniel passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. We'd been married for 25 years, high school sweethearts who built a life together in our small suburban community outside of Boston. Daniel had worked in insurance and I'd been a part-time real estate agent, more as a hobby than a career. When he died, I found myself with a mortgage, minimal savings, and a son who was just finishing college. The first year after Daniel's death was a blur of grief and worry. Jeffrey had just graduated with a business degree, and though he was an adult at 20, I still felt responsible for him. I remember sitting at our kitchen table night after night, going through our finances with trembling hands, wondering how I would survive without Daniel's income. That's when I made the decision to turn my part-time real estate work into a full-fledged business. I took out a small loan, opened my own agency, and worked 80-hour weeks. I missed social events, skipped vacations, and poured every ounce of energy into building Hartley Real Estate from the ground up. Within 5 years, I had 10 agents working for me. By year 10, we were the leading agency in our county with 30 employees and a reputation for integrity and personalized service. Throughout those years, I watched Jeffrey grow into a successful young man. He landed a job at an investment firm in Boston, met Cynthia at a company party, and within 2 years, they were engaged. I adored Cynthia from the start. She was bright, beautiful, and seemed to make my son happier than I'd seen him since before his father died. When Jeffrey brought her to my office to meet me, she complimented my business acumen and asked thoughtful questions about how I'd built my company. I felt an immediate connection. Their wedding was small but elegant, and I was proud to cover most of the expenses. "Mom, you don't have to do this," Jeffrey had protested when I offered to pay for the venue, a beautiful historic hotel in downtown Boston. "Nonsense," Ide raplia. "Your father would have wanted to give you the perfect wedding. Since he can't be here, I'm doing it for both of us." After their honeymoon in Hawaii, another gift from me, they returned with dreams of buying a house. Boston's real estate market was booming, and prices were steep, especially in the neighborhoods they were interested in. When they found a stunning colonial in Brookline with 4 bedrooms and a beautiful yard, I knew they couldn't afford it on their own. "The mortgage payments would be tight," Jeffrey admitted during Sunday dinner at my house. "But it's exactly what we've been looking for." Cynthia nodded, her eyes sparkling with hope. "The school district is amazing for when we have children, and the commute to work would be so much better." I didn't hesitate. "I'll co-sign the mortgage. Your father left me well insured, and the business is doing better than ever." This wasn't entirely true. The insurance money had been modest and mostly spent during those early difficult years, but my business was indeed thriving. The relief and joy on their faces made any financial risk worthwhile. We signed the papers the following week, and I provided the down payment as a gift, $80,000 from my retirement savings. Watching them get the keys to their dream home brought back memories of when Daniel and I had purchased our first house. I felt certain he would approve. Over the next 3 years, my financial support for them continued. When they wanted to renovate the outdated kitchen, I covered the $40,000 cost. When their roof needed unexpected repairs, I wrote a check for $15,000 without question. I added Jeffrey as an authorized user on my premium credit card for emergencies, though I noticed their definition of emergency seemed to include weekend trips to New York and expensive restaurant meals. Every Christmas and birthday brought requests for substantial gifts. A new car for Cynthia, expensive golf clubs for Jeffrey, the latest technology for their home. I gave willingly, happy to provide the things I thought would make their lives better and more comfortable. We established a tradition of weekly Sunday dinners, alternating between their home and mine. I treasured these evenings watching my son and daughter-in-law build their life together. Jeffrey would proudly give me tours of their latest home improvements, while Cynthia prepared elaborate meals that always impressed. During these dinners, they'd share stories about their jobs, their friends, and their plans for the future. Sometimes I noticed tension between them when money came up. Quick glances, a subtle change in tone, but I dismissed it as normal marital stress. Jeffrey was doing well at his investment firm but hadn't reached the senior level he aspired to. Cynthia had recently left her marketing job to start a small online boutique that seemed to require constant financial investment without much return. Despite these occasional concerns, I felt blessed. At 58, I had a successful business, a beautiful home of my own, and a close relationship with my son and daughter-in-law. I'd worked hard to provide security for myself and support for Jeffrey, honoring Daniel's memory by creating the stable, prosperous family life he would have wanted for us. Yet sometimes, in quiet moments alone, a nagging feeling would surface, a sense that something wasn't quite right in Jeffrey and Cynthia's perfect-seeming life. But I would push these thoughts away, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother. After all, what could possibly be wrong when we had so much to be thankful for? The first time I noticed something off was at Jeffrey's 35th birthday party. I'd organized a surprise gathering at their home, coordinating with Cynthia to invite their friends and colleagues. During the party, I went to the kitchen to get more ice and overheard Cynthia talking to Jeffrey in the pantry. "We need to ask her tonight," Cynthia whispered urgently, "while she's in a good mood." "Not now," Jeffrey replied, his voice tense. "She just gave me that watch. If we ask for more so soon, she might start asking questions." They fell silent when I accidentally knocked over a glass, and when they emerged from the pantry, their smiles seemed forced. Jeffrey hugged me tightly. "Thanks for the party, Mom. You're always taking care of me." That night, they didn't ask me for anything, but the conversation lingered in my mind. What were they planning to ask for? And why were they strategizing about my mood? The following month, Jeffrey called to cancel our regular Sunday dinner. "Cynthia's not feeling well," he explained. "Maybe next week?" This became a pattern. Our weekly dinners dwindled to monthly, then even less frequently. When we did get together, I noticed they always steered the conversation toward my business successes or reminiscing about the past, skillfully avoiding details about their current finances or work situations. One evening when I dropped by unexpectedly with homemade soup for Cynthia, who Jeffrey had said was sick again, I found their driveway filled with cars. Through the window, I could see them hosting what appeared to be a dinner party. Confused and hurt, I left the soup on the porch and drove home without ringing the doorbell. Jeffrey called the next day with an elaborate explanation about Cynthia feeling better suddenly and friends surprising them, but his story felt rehearsed. Around this time, my friend Barbara began voicing concerns. We'd been friends since college, and she'd known Jeffrey his entire life. We were having lunch at our favorite cafe when she carefully brought up the subject. "Amanda, I saw Jeffrey and Cynthia at Barnton Mall yesterday," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "They were carrying bags from all those high-end stores, and Cynthia was wearing a diamond bracelet that must have cost a fortune." I shrugged. "Jeffrey's doing well at his firm. They deserve to enjoy their success." Barbara hesitated before continuing. "The thing is, I ran into Harold from the investment firm last week. He mentioned they'd had layoffs recently and that Jeffrey's team was particularly affected. This was news to me. Jeffrey hadn't mentioned any troubles at work. In fact, he'd recently told me about a bonus he was expecting." "I'm sure it's nothing," I said dismissively. "Jeffrey would tell me if there were problems." Barbara reached across the table and took my hand. "Amanda, I've known you too long not to say this. Are you sure Jeffrey and Cynthia aren't taking advantage of your generosity? You've done so much for them already." I pulled my hand away, feeling defensive. "He's my son, Barbara. Of course I help him when I can. That's what family does. There's helping and then there's enabling," she replied gently. "Just be careful." I changed the subject, but Barbara's words nagged at me. That evening, I reviewed my credit card statements and noticed Jeffrey had been using my card more frequently. Expensive restaurants, high-end clothing stores, even a weekend at a luxury resort I hadn't heard about. These weren't emergencies by any definition. A week later, during a rare dinner at their house, Cynthia made a comment that struck me as odd. We were discussing a property I was considering purchasing for my business. I wouldn't bother with that location, she said with surprising authority. Commercial real estate isn't where the smart money is going these days. Jeffrey says you'd be better off letting him invest that money for you. I'd been in real estate for 15 years and had built a successful business through careful property selections. Her dismissive attitude toward my business judgment felt inappropriate and condescending. Jeffrey quickly jumped in. What Cynthia means is that we worry about you taking on too much at your age, Mom. You should be thinking about retirement, not expanding the business. At my age? I was 58, not 80, and in excellent health. Something about their exchange felt rehearsed, as if they'd discussed strategies for accessing my business capital. Later that evening, as I was preparing to leave, Jeffrey followed me to my car. Mom, there's something I wanted to talk to you about, he began, his expression serious. We're thinking about doing some major renovations on the house. The master bathroom is outdated, and we'd like to expand the kitchen further and add a sunroom. That sounds extensive, I replied. What's your budget looking like? He looked down at his feet. Well, that's the thing. We got some quotes and it's going to run about $75,000. Our home equity line was denied because of some issues with Cynthia's credit score from her business startup costs. $75,000 for renovations to a house that had already been substantially upgraded seemed excessive, especially given the bathroom update I'd funded just 18 months earlier. That's a lot of money, Jeffrey. Is this really necessary right now? The contractor says it will significantly increase the home's value, he explained quickly. It's really an investment. And with the baby coming, we want everything perfect. This was the first I'd heard about a baby. Cynthia's pregnant? Why didn't you tell me earlier? That's wonderful news. A flash of panic crossed his face before he smiled. We wanted to be sure everything was progressing well before we announced it. It's still early. Despite my reservations about the renovations, the news of a grandchild weakened my resolve. Let me think about the loan, okay? And congratulations. I'm so happy for you both. As I drove home, conflicting emotions churned inside me. Joy about the potential grandchild mixed with growing unease about Jeffrey and Cynthia's financial requests. Why hadn't they mentioned the pregnancy during dinner? And why did Jeffrey look panicked when I asked about it? The next morning, I decided to call Jeffrey to discuss the renovation loan further and clarify details about Cynthia's pregnancy. I wanted to be supportive but also needed to understand exactly what I was paying for and why their financial situation seemed increasingly precarious despite their apparent luxury spending. I picked up my phone to call Jeffrey about the renovation loan details, wanting to get a clearer picture of their plans and timeline. It was just after 9 in the morning, and I knew he typically arrived at his office by 8:30. This would be a good time to catch him before his day became too busy. The phone rang 3 times before Jeffrey answered, his voice slightly distracted. Morning, Mom, can I call you back? I'm just heading into a meeting. This will only take a minute, I assured him. I wanted to talk about the renovation loan you mentioned last night and get some more specifics. Oh, right, he said, his tone shifting to one of increased interest. Hold on, let me close my office door for privacy. I heard shuffling sounds, a door closing, and then what sounded like Jeffrey setting down the phone. But the call didn't disconnect. Instead, I realized Jeffrey had accidentally put me on speaker and forgotten to mute the call, or hang up properly. Who was that? I heard Cynthia's voice ask. She must have been in his office with him. Just my mother, Jeffrey replied, his voice suddenly changing in a way I'd never heard before, dismissive, almost contemptuous. She's calling about the renovation money. Cynthia laughed, a sharp sound that sent a chill through me. Perfect timing. Did she buy the bathroom renovation story? Hook, line, and sinker, Jeffrey said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. I threw in that fake pregnancy news too. You should have seen her face light up about having a grandchild. Suddenly she wasn't so concerned about the money anymore. My hand began to tremble as I held the phone. Fake pregnancy? They had lied to me about expecting a baby just to manipulate me emotionally? She's too stupid to realize what's really going on, Jeffrey continued laughing. All these years building a real estate business, and she can't even see when she's being played. We've gotten about $300,000 from her in the last 5 years. At least, Cynthia agreed. Between the down payment, the renovations, the credit cards, and all those emergency expenses. And she never questions anything. Just smiles and writes another check because you're her precious baby boy. I felt physically ill, my free hand clutching the edge of my kitchen counter for support as my world tilted on its axis. So what's the plan for this $75,000? Cynthia asked. 20 for my new car, 30 for your investment with Greg, and the rest for Aspen in February? Exactly, Jeffrey confirmed. I'll tell her we need to pay the contractor half up front. She'll transfer the money this week guaranteed. Then we can come up with some story about delays or permit issues when she asks about progress. What if she wants to see plans or meet the contractor? Cynthia asked. She never does, Jeffrey replied confidently. She trusts me completely. Anyway, I'll just say we're using the same guy who did the kitchen, and she already knows him. She's so desperate to be part of our lives that she never questions anything. It's almost too easy. Remember how she offered to pay for IVF when I fake cried about fertility issues last year? Cynthia said, laughing again. $20,000 for treatments we never got. That funded our entire trip to Europe. The best part is she thinks I'm still at Anderson Financial, Jeffrey continued. She has no idea I was let go 8 months ago. The bonus I keep talking about is just her money being recycled. Well, your new consulting business seems to be primarily consulting your mother out of her retirement, Cynthia joked cruelly. Speaking of which, we should start planting seeds about helping her manage her business. She must have considerable equity we could access. Already working on it, Jeffrey replied. I've been suggesting she's getting too old to handle everything. Another year of this, and I bet we can convince her to sign over partial control. Her business is worth millions. She'll be working until she's 80 to support our lifestyle, Cynthia said with another laugh. As long as she doesn't catch on, who cares? Jeffrey responded. Anyway, I better call her back about this renovation money. Same approach as usual, grateful son, exciting future, subtle pressure about family obligations. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face as I listened to my son and his wife callously discuss how they had been systematically manipulating and deceiving me for years. Every special moment, every expression of gratitude, every shared plan had been calculated to extract money from me. The renovation, the pregnancy announcement, even Cynthia's supposed health issues. All elaborate lies designed to exploit my love and generosity. With a shaking finger, I ended the call before they could realize I was still on the line. I couldn't bear to hear another word. I placed the phone carefully on the counter and sank to the kitchen floor. My knees giving way as 15 years of memories reshuffled themselves in my mind, taking on new, painful meanings. The strategic cancellations when they didn't need anything from me. The lavish displays of affection that always preceded financial requests. The expensive purchases that appeared shortly after I gave them money for essential expenses. All the pieces fit together now in a devastating new pattern. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind replaying their cruel words and laughter. She's too stupid to realize what's really going on. My own son had said those words about me. The woman who had raised him alone after his father died, who had sacrificed everything to give him a good life, who had handed over her hard-earned money without question because she loved him unconditionally. As the initial shock began to fade, a new emotion took its place. A slow-burning anger that started deep in my chest and gradually spread throughout my body. They thought I was stupid? They thought they could continue to drain my finances while mocking me behind my back? They thought I was too blind with motherly love to protect myself? It was time to show Jeffrey and Cynthia exactly who they were dealing with. Not just a doting mother, but a businesswoman who had built a company from nothing through intelligence, hard work, and determination. A woman who had survived the devastating loss of her husband and had emerged stronger. A woman who would not be taken advantage of any longer, even by her own child. I picked myself up off the floor, dried my tears, and began to plan. After hearing Jeffrey and Cynthia's conversation, I spent the rest of the day in a fog of emotional turmoil. Jeffrey called back twice, but I let the calls go to voicemail, unable to trust myself to speak to him without revealing what I'd heard. His messages were exactly as he described to Cynthia: warm, enthusiastic about the renovations, mentioning the baby with calculated excitement. That night I barely slept. My mind kept replaying their words, each replay like a fresh knife to my heart. She's too stupid to realize what's really going on. The casual cruelty of their laughter echoed in my head. How long had this been happening? Had Jeffrey always seen me as nothing more than a bank account to be drained? Had there ever been genuine love there at all? By morning, denial had set in. Perhaps I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were joking in poor taste. Maybe Jeffrey was trying to impress Cynthia with bravado. I desperately wanted to believe there was some explanation that wouldn't destroy the relationship I treasured with my only child. I called in sick to work for the first time in years and began methodically reviewing my financial records. I pulled out bank statements, credit card bills, and investment accounts from the past 5 years. I created a spreadsheet documenting every dollar I'd given Jeffrey and Cynthia: the down payment, renovations, credit card charges, emergency expenses, gifts. When I finished, the total made me physically ill: $327,000. And that didn't include the ongoing liability of the mortgage I'd co-signed. Next, I searched for documentation of Jeffrey's employment. As his emergency contact and insurance beneficiary, I had paperwork from when he'd started at Anderson Financial 7 years ago. I found their main number and, with a sick feeling in my stomach, called their HR department. "I'm trying to reach Jeffrey Hartley," I said when the receptionist answered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley is no longer with the company," she replied smoothly. "Would you like me to connect you with someone else in the investment division?" "When did he leave?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Let me check our records," she said. After a brief pause, "Mr. Hartley's employment ended in November of last year. 8 months ago." Exactly as he'd said to Cynthia. All those stories about work projects, office politics, and bonuses had been complete fabrications. While I'd been celebrating his non-existent successes, he'd been systematically stealing from me. Around noon I called Barbara. I needed someone who knew both Jeffrey and me, someone I could trust with this devastating revelation. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Something's happened." Barbara arrived 30 minutes later with lunch I couldn't eat and a concerned expression that broke into shock as I played the recording I'd made of Jeffrey and Cynthia's conversation. I'd recorded it from my phone's voicemail where I'd saved the accidental call, needing evidence of what I'd heard in case I started to doubt my own memory. "Oh, Amanda," Barbara whispered when the recording ended. "I'm so sorry." The sympathy in her voice broke something in me, and I began to sob deep, wrenching cries that came from a place of profound betrayal. Barbara held me while I cried, making no attempt to offer platitudes or false comfort. When I could finally speak again, I told her about my financial discoveries. "I've been such a fool," I concluded. "You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen." "This isn't your fault," Barbara said firmly. "You loved your son and trusted him as any mother would. He and Cynthia are the ones who violated that trust. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" Her practical question helped focus my swirling emotions. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to confront them immediately, throw their lies in their faces. Another part never wants to speak to them again." "Before you do anything, you need to protect yourself financially," Barbara advised. "They clearly have no intention of stopping. In fact, it sounds like they're planning to go after your business next." She was right. As painful as it was to admit, Jeffrey and Cynthia had proven themselves to be calculating and remorseless. They saw me as a resource to be exploited, not as a person with feelings who loved them. Any confrontation would only give them the opportunity to create more elaborate lies or to manipulate my emotions further. "I need to talk to a lawyer," I decided. Barbara nodded. "I think that's wise. Do you want me to go with you?" The next day, Barbara accompanied me to meet with Jessica Torres, a family law attorney who came highly recommended. I brought copies of all my financial records and played the recording for her. Jessica listened carefully, her expression professionally neutral. "First, let me say how sorry I am that you're going through this," she said when I finished. "Family betrayal is particularly painful, but you've done the right thing by coming in promptly. We need to protect your assets immediately." She explained my options clearly. As a co-signer on the mortgage, I had certain rights but also significant liability. The credit cards were simpler. I could remove Jeffrey as an authorized user immediately. Any joint accounts needed to be frozen or closed. What about the money they've already taken? I asked. Can I get any of it back? Jessica's expression was sympathetic but realistic. Some of it might be recoverable, especially if we can prove fraud or misrepresentation. But litigation is expensive and emotionally draining. Before we go that route, I suggest we focus on stopping the bleeding and protecting your remaining assets. She helped me develop a comprehensive plan to disentangle my finances from Jeffrey and Cynthia's. It would require multiple steps and careful timing. As I listened to her advice, a strange calm settled over me. The path forward was difficult but clear. When should I confront them? I asked. Not until everything is in place, Jessica advised. Once they realize you've discovered their deception, they'll likely scramble to access any remaining funds or create new financial entanglements. We need to close those doors before they know we're onto them. On the drive home, Barbara asked how I was feeling. Surprisingly determined, I replied. For years after Daniel died, I focused all my energy on providing for Jeffrey and building my business. I lost myself in being a mother and a businesswoman. Maybe it's time I figured out who Amanda Hartley really is, separate from being Jeffrey's mother. I think that's very healthy, Barbara said. And I'll be here every step of the way. That night, I added a third column to my spreadsheet. The first listed all the money Jeffrey and Cynthia had taken from me. The second detailed the steps I needed to take to protect myself financially. The third was different. It was a list of things I wanted to do for myself once this ordeal was behind me. Travel to places I'd always wanted to see. Renovate my own home rather than Jeffrey's. Take painting classes. Join a hiking group. Small and large dreams I deferred while focusing on others. As I wrote this list, I felt something unexpected. A flicker of gratitude. Without this painful revelation, I might have continued pouring my resources and energy into Jeffrey and Cynthia indefinitely, neglecting my own needs and dreams. Their betrayal was forcing me to prioritize myself for perhaps the first time since Daniel died. This realization didn't lessen the pain or excuse their actions, but it gave meaning to my suffering and direction to my anger. I would not be destroyed by this betrayal. I would use it as a catalyst for change. The next morning I called Jessica. I'm ready to implement our plan, I told her. Let's get started. My first stop was Boston Federal Bank, where I'd maintained accounts for over 30 years. The personal banking manager, Lloyd, had handled my business accounts since I'd opened my real estate agency and knew me well. Mrs. Hartley, what can I do for you today? He asked warmly as I took a seat in his office. I need to make some significant changes to my accounts, I explained, keeping my voice steady. I'd like to remove my son Jeffrey as an authorized user on all my accounts and credit cards, effective immediately. Lloyd's eyebrows rose slightly, but his professional demeanor remained intact. Of course. May I ask if there's a particular reason? Only so that I can ensure we're taking the appropriate steps to address your concerns. I prepared for this question. Jeffrey and his wife have established their own financial independence, I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. It's time to separate our finances completely. Lloyd nodded and began typing on his computer. I'll need you to sign several forms. We can deactivate all existing cards today and issue new ones with different numbers to prevent any unauthorized charges. As he processed the paperwork, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Each signature was both a protection against further exploitation and a severing of ties with my son. By the time I left the bank, Jeffrey no longer had access to any of my accounts, and my credit cards had been canceled with new ones expedited to my address. My next step was more difficult. I drove to Northeastern Mortgage, the company holding the loan on Jeffrey and Cynthia's house. As a co-signer, I was legally responsible for the payments if they defaulted, a risk I could no longer afford to take. The mortgage officer, Paula, listened carefully as I explained my situation, omitting the personal details but making it clear that I needed to remove myself from the mortgage. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hartley, you can't simply remove yourself as a co-signer, Paula explained. The lender approved the loan based on your income and credit history as well as your son's. Removing you would require refinancing the mortgage entirely, which would need your son's cooperation and qualification on his own. This was what Jessica had prepared me for. What are my options then? Well, Paula said hesitantly, since you're a co-signer and not just a guarantor, you technically have an ownership interest in the property. You could potentially force a sale of the house to eliminate the shared liability. The thought of forcing my son and his wife out of their home made my stomach clench, but I reminded myself of their callous words. She'll be working until she's 80 to support our lifestyle. They had shown no concern for my financial security or future. I'd like to explore that option, I said. What's the process? Paula explained that I would need to file a petition action through the courts, essentially asking a judge to order the sale of the property so that the mortgage could be paid off and any equity divided according to ownership percentages. It would take time and might become contentious, but it was legally possible. In the meantime, she added, I should warn you that if payments are missed, it will affect your credit as well as your son's. You might want to consider making payments yourself if that becomes an issue, at least until the legal process is complete. I nodded, making notes of everything she told me. One more question. If I'm a co-signer, do I have the right to know if the mortgage payments are current? Absolutely, Paula confirmed. Let me check that for you. A few keystrokes later, her expression changed subtly. The account is actually 30 days past due, Mrs. Hartley. A payment was missed last month. This new information stung like salt in an open wound. Even while asking me for $75,000 for renovations, Jeffrey and Cynthia hadn't bothered to stay current on their mortgage, a mortgage I was legally responsible for. I'd like to make that payment today, I said, knowing that protecting my credit rating was essential, and I want to be notified immediately of any future missed payments. After handling the mortgage issue, I called Jessica to update her and set the petition action in motion. It's going to take some time, she warned me. And once we file, Jeffrey will be notified by the court. That will effectively end the quiet phase of our plan. I understand, I replied, but I need to protect myself. What's next? The credit cards you've handled. The mortgage will take time, but you've started the process. Now we need to document everything and prepare for the confrontation that's inevitably coming. Have you been keeping a journal of all your actions and their communications? I hadn't, but I started that evening, creating a detailed timeline of events beginning with the overheard conversation, and including every financial and legal step I'd taken since. I also compiled a folder with copies of all financial records, the recorded conversation, and notes from my meetings with Jessica. Throughout this process, Jeffrey called several times daily. His voicemails grew increasingly urgent as the week progressed. Mom, just checking in about that renovation discussion. Call me back when you can. Mom, is everything okay? You haven't returned my calls. I'm getting worried. Mom, please call me back. We really need to finalize those renovation plans this week to secure the contractor. I didn't return any of his calls. Each message only reinforced the manipulative patterns Jessica had warned me about. He never mentioned the mortgage payment I'd made, though he must have been aware of it. 6 days after the fateful phone call, I received a text from Cynthia. Amanda, Jeffrey's really worried about you. Are you upset with us about something? Please call. The false concern made my blood boil. I showed the message to Barbara, who had become my daily support through this ordeal. They're starting to realize something's wrong, she observed. Their cash cow isn't responding as expected. Cash cow, I repeated, the term simultaneously hurtful and accurate. Is that all I've ever been to them? No, Barbara said firmly. You've been a loving mother who was taken advantage of by people who didn't deserve your generosity. Their actions define them, not you. The following day brought the development Jessica had anticipated. I received an automated alert from my credit monitoring service about an attempted charge on one of my canceled credit cards. A $12,000 charge at a luxury jewelry store in Boston's Back Bay. The charge had been declined. Within an hour, Jeffrey called again, this time leaving a message that dropped all pretense of casual checking in. Mom, there seems to be some problem with the card. I tried to use it for a business expense and it was declined. Can you call the bank right away? It's really urgent. A business expense at a jewelry store? More lies. I forwarded the voicemail to Jessica, who called me immediately. This is actually good for us, she said. It demonstrates intent to make unauthorized charges after you've revoked permission. Save everything. The confrontation phase is about to begin, whether we're ready or not. That evening I sat in my living room with Barbara, a glass of wine in hand, preparing mentally for what was to come. My phone, silent for hours, suddenly rang. Jeffrey again. Are you ready to answer? Barbara asked. I shook my head. Not yet. One more day. I want all the paperwork from Jessica in hand first. You're handling this with incredible strength, Barbara said, squeezing my hand. I'm so proud of you. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel heartbroken, but I won't let them destroy everything I've worked for. I won't let them turn me into a victim. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from Jessica containing all the legal documentation I'd need. The petition action filing, records of the credit card cancellations, proof of the mortgage payment I'd made, and a formal cease and desist letter addressing any future attempts to access my finances. I placed these documents in a folder, took a deep breath, and picked up my phone. It was time to face my son. Discussion with Dr. Winters, I decided to cautiously reestablish limited contact with Jeffrey, making it clear that while I would welcome a relationship with my grandchild, my financial boundaries remained firm. Our interactions now are cordial but distant. We meet occasionally for coffee in public places, the conversation carefully navigating around neutral topics. Jeffrey seems different, more subdued, perhaps humbled by the consequences of his actions. Cynthia is largely absent from these meetings, claiming morning sickness or doctor's appointments, though I suspect she simply prefers to avoid facing me. The most significant change has been in Jeffrey's attitude toward money. Without access to my finances, he and Cynthia have had to adjust their lifestyle dramatically. The Aspen vacation was canceled. Cynthia drives the same car. Their credit card debt has forced them to create a strict budget for perhaps the first time in their marriage. These changes weren't voluntary, but they've been necessary, and possibly even beneficial in the long run. Last week, Jeffrey asked if I would consider helping with the baby's college fund. It was a test and we both knew it. Instead of an outright refusal, I offered to help him research 529 plans that he and Cynthia could fund themselves through automatic monthly contributions. I'll match what you save, I told him, but I'll pay it directly into the account, not to you. He accepted this arrangement without argument, a small but meaningful sign of progress. As I reflect on the past 6 months, I realize that while the pain of betrayal hasn't disappeared, it has transformed into something more manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. I've learned that love doesn't require sacrificing self-respect, that generosity without boundaries becomes exploitation, and that sometimes the healthiest thing we can do for those we love is to stop enabling destructive patterns. Most importantly, I've discovered my own resilience. When my husband died 15 years ago, I thought it was the most difficult challenge I would ever face. Building a business as a widow in my 40s seemed nearly impossible then. But discovering my only child had been systematically exploiting my love and trust for years, that was a different kind of devastation, one that struck at the core of my identity as a mother. Yet here I stand, still moving forward, still building, still finding joy in new experiences and relationships. The betrayal that could have broken me instead forced me to redefine myself beyond the role of Jeffrey's mother. It pushed me to reclaim parts of myself I had neglected, and to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed. If you're watching this and facing your own betrayal by someone you love, know that survival is possible. Healing doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the pain never happened. It means integrating that experience into a new understanding of yourself and your relationships. It means establishing boundaries that protect your well-being, while remaining open to genuine connection. Remember, when someone underestimates you when they think you're too stupid to realize what's going on, that's their mistake, not your failing. True strength isn't found in never being hurt or betrayed. It's found in how you respond when it happens. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on navigating complex family dynamics. And remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in facing difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when necessary and the wisdom to know when letting go is the most loving choice you can make, both for yourself and for those who need to learn from their mistakes. Exactly 1 week after overhearing that devastating conversation, I finally returned Jeffrey's call. My heart pounded as the phone rang, but I'd rehearsed what I needed to say. I would stay calm, stick to facts, and not allow emotional manipulation to derail me. Jeffrey answered on the second ring, his voice a mixture of relief and irritation. "Mom, finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. Is everything okay?" "Hello, Jeffrey," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm calling to discuss some important matters. Before that, did you know there's something wrong with the credit card? I tried to use it for an important purchase and it was declined. And we got a weird notice from the mortgage company about a payment being made." Of course, his financial concerns came before any worry about my well-being, despite his claim of trying to reach me because he was concerned. "Yes, I'm aware of both those things," I replied evenly. "I canceled that credit card. All of them, actually. And I made the mortgage payment because it was 30 days overdue." There was a moment of stunned silence before Jeffrey spoke again, his voice cautious. "You canceled the cards? Why would you do that without telling me?" "I think you know why, Jeffrey." Another pause. "Mom, what's going on? You're acting strange. I received some disturbing information about how you and Cynthia view our relationship," I said, still maintaining my composure. "Information that necessitated immediate financial changes." "What are you talking about?" His voice took on a defensive edge. "Whatever you heard or whatever someone told you, it's obviously a misunderstanding." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it a misunderstanding that you've been lying to me about still working at Anderson Financial, despite being let go 8 months ago?" His sharp intake of breath was audible. "Who told you that?" "That's not. I'm doing consulting work for them now, which is basically the same thing." "And is it a misunderstanding that you and Cynthia have been systematically manipulating me for money? That the $75,000 you requested for renovations was actually intended for a new car for Cynthia, an investment scheme, and a vacation to Aspen?" "Mom, this is crazy," Jeffrey sputtered. "Someone's been feeding you lies. We would never." "Or perhaps," I continued, my voice finally betraying a hint of the anger I felt, "it's a misunderstanding that you think I'm too stupid to realize what's really going on? That you've gotten at least $300,000 from me in 5 years? That you find it almost too easy to manipulate me because I'm so desperate to be part of your lives." The silence that followed was deafening. When Jeffrey finally spoke, his voice had completely changed. "How did you? Did someone record us?" "You did, Jeffrey. Last week when I called about the renovation loan, you didn't hang up properly. I heard everything you and Cynthia said about me." I heard muffled sounds as Jeffrey apparently covered the phone to speak to someone else. Cynthia, undoubtedly. When he returned, his tone had shifted to desperate damage control. "Mom, you have to understand. We were just blowing off steam. Things have been really stressful with work transitions and we sometimes say stupid things we don't mean. You know we love you." "Do I?" I asked. "Because from what I heard, what you love is my money and how easily you can extract it from me with lies and emotional manipulation." "That's not fair," he protested. "We were just talking nonsense. People say things they don't mean all the time." I heard Cynthia in the background asking for the phone. After some rustling, her voice came on the line, honeyed and conciliatory. "Amanda, please listen," she began. "We're both horrified that you overheard that awful conversation. We were having a bad day and saying terrible things we didn't mean. You've been so generous with us and we're deeply grateful. That stupid conversation doesn't reflect how we truly feel about you." "Was the pregnancy lie also something you didn't mean?" I asked, my voice tight with controlled emotion. "Using my desire for a grandchild to manipulate me financially? That was Jeffrey's idea," Cynthia said quickly, throwing him under the bus without hesitation. "I told him it was wrong, but he thought it would make you happy to think." I heard Jeffrey protest in the background, and more shuffling as he apparently grabbed the phone back. "Mom, we've made some mistakes," he admitted, his tone now remorseful. But we can fix this. Let's meet in person and talk everything through. Family is too important to let misunderstandings come between us. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Jeffrey. I heard you clearly. And no, we won't be meeting in person right now. Instead, you'll be receiving some legal documents in the next few days. Legal documents? What are you talking about? Alarm had replaced the false remorse in his voice. I've initiated a petition action for the house, I explained calmly. As a co-signer on the mortgage, I have that right. The property will need to be sold to remove my financial liability. You can't do that. Jeffrey exploded. This is our home. You're going to force us out of our house over one stupid conversation. Not over one conversation, I corrected him. Over years of deliberate deception and financial exploitation. The conversation merely exposed the truth. So that's it? You're just cutting us off completely? Your own son and daughter-in-law. I'm protecting myself from further financial abuse, I replied. Something I should have done long ago. As for our relationship, that's a separate issue. One that would require genuine remorse and significant changes on your part to even begin addressing. This is insane, Jeffrey said, his voice rising. You're overreacting to some private venting. Everyone complains about family sometimes. Most people don't systematically defraud their mothers while mocking them behind their backs, I pointed out. Most people don't fake pregnancies to extract money. Most people don't see their parents as ATMs to fund their luxury lifestyles. What do you want from us? Jeffrey demanded, his tone now somewhere between angry and panicked. An apology? Fine, we're sorry. We shouldn't have said those things. But this legal action is extreme and unnecessary. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to understand the consequences of your actions. You and Cynthia made choices to lie, manipulate, and exploit my love for you. Now you'll face the consequences of those choices. Mom, please, his voice cracked slightly. We can't lose the house. Where would we go? What would people think? Even now, his concerns were superficial. Appearances and convenience rather than the damage done to our relationship or my trust. You should have considered those questions before embarking on years of deception, I replied. I've made my decision, Jeffrey. The legal process has already begun. You'll regret this, he said, his tone suddenly cold. When you're old and alone, you'll wish you hadn't pushed away your only family. The threat was as transparent as it was cruel. Another attempt at emotional manipulation, this time using my fears of isolation and old age. But it no longer worked. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who see me as nothing but a resource to exploit, I said quietly. Goodbye, Jeffrey. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or uncertainty, from the release of tension after finally speaking my truth. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself against Jeffrey's manipulation. I had exposed the lies and refused to accept more. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls from both Jeffrey and Cynthia. I silenced it and set it aside. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as Jessica had predicted: initial denial, followed by minimizing, just blowing off steam. Then blame-shifting, appeals to family loyalty, and finally threats and intimidation when all else failed. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in my quiet living room, feeling strangely peaceful despite the storm of emotions I just weathered. The hardest part was over. I had faced the truth about my son and taken concrete steps to protect myself. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, but I had reclaimed my power and my dignity. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. 3 months have passed since that painful phone call with Jeffrey. Autumn has arrived, painting the trees outside my window in brilliant reds and golds. A reminder that there can be beauty in letting go. The journey since confronting my son has been difficult but transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. The first month was the hardest. Jeffrey and Cynthia cycled through various tactics to regain access to my finances. They showed up unannounced at my home with tearful apologies and promises to change. They enlisted mutual friends to plead their case. Jeffrey even tried to contact some of my business associates, attempting to suggest I was making irrational decisions due to health concerns. A particularly low blow that backfired when my colleagues reported these conversations to me immediately. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries I had established with Jessica's help. I agreed to meet with Jeffrey and Cynthia only once during that period, in Jessica's office with her present. The meeting was tense and ultimately unproductive. They continued to minimize their actions, characterizing their deception as poor communication, and suggesting that my response was disproportionate to their mistakes. Jessica was magnificent, calmly presenting documentation of their systematic financial exploitation while I sat quietly, observing the people I had loved and trusted for so long try to manipulate their way out of accountability. When it became clear that they still didn't truly accept responsibility for their actions, I ended the meeting, telling them I needed time and space, and that any future relationship would require genuine remorse and changed behavior. The legal process for the house moved forward despite their attempts to delay it. The court ordered an appraisal, which valued the property significantly higher than when they had purchased it. Ironically, partly due to the renovations I had funded, rather than proceed to a forced sale, Jeffrey and Cynthia eventually agreed to refinance the mortgage solely in their names, removing my liability entirely. This was only possible because Jeffrey had finally secured legitimate employment at a smaller investment firm, motivated by the financial necessity I had created by withdrawing my support. On the personal front, my healing journey has been gradual but meaningful. Barbara introduced me to her therapist, Dr. Winters, who specializes in family trauma and betrayal. Our weekly sessions have helped me process the complex grief of losing the relationship I thought I had with my son, while mourning the relationship I wished we'd had. You're not grieving just Jeffrey, Dr. Winters pointed out during one particularly powerful session. You're grieving the son you thought you had, the person who existed in your mind but not in reality. That's a profound loss. These insights helped me understand why the pain cut so deeply. I wasn't just dealing with financial betrayal, but with the collapse of my fundamental understanding of one of my most important relationships. Professionally, I've found renewed passion for my real estate business. Free from the constant drain of supporting Jeffrey and Cynthia's lifestyle, I've expanded into commercial properties and opened a second office in a neighboring town. The focus and energy I once spent worrying about my son's finances has been redirected into growing my company, resulting in our most profitable quarter ever. I've also begun nurturing my personal life in ways I'd neglected for years. I joined a women's hiking group that meets every Saturday morning, discovering muscles I didn't know I had and making friends who know me as Amanda, not just as Jeffrey's mother. I enrolled in painting classes at the community center, tapping into a creative side that had been dormant since college. Last month, I booked a 2-week trip to Italy for next spring, something I've dreamed of doing since Daniel and I first married but always postponed for someday. As for Jeffrey and Cynthia, our relationship has shifted into something I never would have chosen, but can accept as healthier than what came before. 2 months after our confrontation, Jeffrey called with news that Cynthia was actually pregnant, for real this time. My initial reaction was skepticism, but a subsequent sonogram image and doctor's confirmation proved the pregnancy was genuine. This development created a complicated new dimension to our estrangement. Despite everything, the thought of having a grandchild stirred deep emotions in me. After much reflection and discussion with Dr. Winters, I decided to cautiously reestablish limited contact with Jeffrey, making it clear that while I would welcome a relationship with my grandchild, my financial boundaries remained firm. Our interactions now are cordial but distant. We meet occasionally for coffee in public places, the conversation carefully navigating around neutral topics. Jeffrey seems different, more subdued, perhaps humbled by the consequences of his actions. Cynthia is largely absent from these meetings, claiming morning sickness or doctor's appointments, though I suspect she simply prefers to avoid facing me. The most significant change has been in Jeffrey's attitude toward money. Without access to my finances, he and Cynthia have had to adjust their lifestyle dramatically. The Aspen vacation was canceled. Cynthia drives the same car. Their credit card debt has forced them to create a strict budget for perhaps the first time in their marriage. These changes weren't voluntary, but they've been necessary, and possibly even beneficial in the long run. Last week, Jeffrey asked if I would consider helping with the baby's college fund. It was a test and we both knew it. Instead of an outright refusal, I offered to help him research 529 plans that he and Cynthia could fund themselves through automatic monthly contributions. I'll match what you save, I told him. But I'll pay it directly into the account, not to you. He accepted this arrangement without argument, a small but meaningful sign of progress. As I reflect on the past 6 months, I realize that while the pain of betrayal hasn't disappeared, it has transformed into something more manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. I've learned that love doesn't require sacrificing self-respect, that generosity without boundaries becomes exploitation, and that sometimes the healthiest thing we can do for those we love is to stop enabling destructive patterns. Most importantly, I've discovered my own resilience. When my husband died 15 years ago, I thought it was the most difficult challenge I would ever face. Building a business as a widow in my 40s seemed nearly impossible then. But discovering my only child had been systematically exploiting my love and trust for years, that was a different kind of devastation, one that struck at the core of my identity as a mother. Yet here I stand, still moving forward, still building, still finding joy in new experiences and relationships. The betrayal that could have broken me instead forced me to redefine myself beyond the role of Jeffrey's mother. It pushed me to reclaim parts of myself I had neglected, and to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed. If you're watching this and facing your own betrayal by someone you love, know that survival is possible. Healing doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the pain never happened. It means integrating that experience into a new understanding of yourself and your relationships. It means establishing boundaries that protect your well-being, while remaining open to genuine connection. Remember, when someone underestimates you when they think you're too stupid to realize what's going on, that's their mistake, not your failing. True strength isn't found in never being hurt or betrayed. It's found in how you respond when it happens. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on navigating complex family dynamics. And remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in facing difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when necessary and the wisdom to know when letting go is the most loving choice you can make, both for yourself and for those who need to learn from their mistakes.